Hey guys, it's Lindsay Payne reporting here for Double G Sports. We're actually at a special place right now located in Montclair, New Jersey. We're at Yogi Berra's museum where we have a special opportunity of talking to Lindsay Berra, his oldest grandchild. So don't touch that mouse because we're about to get the inside scoop on Yogi Berra. Hi guys, this is Lindsay Payne reporting from Yogi Berra Stadium in Montclair, New Jersey, and we're joined with special guest Lindsay Berra. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you guys for coming.
And can you introduce yourself?
I'm on the board here at the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center. I am also a national correspondent for MLB.com, Major League Baseball, and I am also Yogi and Carmen Berra's oldest granddaughter. There's a lot there.
So how is it growing up being Yogi Berra's oldest granddaughter?
It was a lot of fun. People ask me this all the time, but it was pretty much like growing up with anyone else as your grandfather, because when you're young, you don't know that he's famous. And by the time that I was old enough to understand that more people knew who he was than just my family, he'd already been just grandpa for so long that it didn't really matter. It was kind of hard to reconcile his public persona with the person that we knew.
So when you were in high school and you went to college, how was that? Did people approach you about him all the time?
In high school, a lot, but he was a kind of a regular at like the softball fields and my hockey games and all that kind of stuff, and people had been seeing him come to my sporting events, my brother's sporting events, since we were little kids, so it was just kind of like, oh, Yogi's here, kind of old hat. I went to school in North Carolina, so not as many people knew about it, but when people did find out, they definitely asked me about it, and actually that was sort of one of the things that made me realize how famous he was, because people knew who he was outside of my little home state of New Jersey and the tri-state area of New York where he played. A lot of people in North Carolina were obviously very well aware and loved him too, so it was perspective.
Okay guys, so we're in the Yogi Berra Museum here in Montclair, New Jersey. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the museum?
The museum has been here now for about, oh my God, 15 years, over 15 years, a really long time now. It really is just a way to commemorate my grandfather's legacy and the character ideals that he embodied throughout his entire career with teammates, or working with teammates, teamwork, hard work, you know, setting a goal and getting to it, loyalty, respect, sportsmanship, all kinds of things that we try to teach kids here through the museum's programs. And then we also have a lot of really cool memorabilia on display, and we get traveling exhibits from other places, the New York Sports Museum, the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Private collectors will exhibit their stuff here from time to time as well.
So how often would you say that your grandfather actually comes to your museum?
Over the years, this place really has been like his second home, but recently he's just not as mobile as he used to be, so he's not here as often. He's more here for special events and on nights when we have things going on. But in the past, he was in that office all the time, really to a point where he was preventing people from getting anything done. He loved it here. And it also has, we're attached to Yogi Berra Stadium, which is where the New Jersey Jackals play, and the team for Montclair State University, so he would come here, sit out and watch a couple innings of the ball game and just kind of hang out. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about some of the stuff that we have on exhibit in the museum here. This panel here is just sort of talking about where my grandfather grew up, which was in the Hill section, the Italian section of St. Louis. It's now called Yogi Berra Way. I think they renamed the street, but Hall of Fame Way. 3 Hall of Famers grew up on the block. Joe Garagiola, who's in the Hall of Fame for broadcasting, played for the Cardinals, was my grandfather's best friend. My grandfather, who went into the Hall of Fame in 1972, and Jack Buck, who is another Hall of Fame broadcaster. His son Joe Buck now works for Fox, but they all grew up in the same little neighborhood in St. Louis. So this is a picture of the house that my grandfather grew up in, that his family actually still lives in. This little section right here is very popular, and it was kind of a big deal for us too, because my grandmother, for years and years and years, hid these letters in the basement or wherever she hid them in her office, locked in a desk drawer. We knew that my grandfather had written her dozens and dozens and dozens of love letters when he was on the road, and we heard about them, but we were never allowed to see them. And finally, somebody, I don't know why she changed her mind, convinced her to let us display some of these love letters in the museum. They're very funny for me to read. My grandfather didn't go to school past the 8th grade. He has amazing penmanship, and every other word is, "My dearest darling, I love you so much, I can't wait to see you again." So he was very emotional, and they're really very, very sweet. My grandfather won 3 MVP plaques in his career, 2 of them back to back. We have 2 of them on display here, along with some other interesting stuff. That was the belt buckle they won in 1955 for winning the American League pennant. They didn't always get rings because the Yankees had won so many titles that having that many rings, they had more than they had fingers, so they started to do other things like belt buckles. This picture is actually really funny. This is my grandfather checking out Gil Hodges after he got hit in the face with a ball that he fouled off his own face. They were buddies, but from far away, this grandpa here with his posture and his size looks just like my brother Larry. So from across the way, I'm always like, "Larry, you got the biggest picture in the whole museum." My grandfather has won more World Series rings than any other player in baseball history. He won 10 as a player, 4 more as a coach, and they are all on display here. This is a very fancy, blinged out case.
This 2009 World Series ring is some major bling.
So you've seen some of the very classic old-timey World Series rings that my grandfather won in the 50s and the 60s. This is a ring that he was given for the 2009 World Series. You can really see how they've gotten more and more fancy and kind of ostentatious.
Okay, Lindsay, so tell us how your grandfather's career helped you in the sports world.
I don't know if his career necessarily so much did, because by the time I was around, he had really stopped playing. He was managing. I did get to see him on the field with the Yankees and the Astros and whatnot later as a manager and a coach. But he really just did give me a love for sports, and he was also a big hockey fan, a big boxing fan. He's a basketball fan, a football fan. He's always watching something. So there was never a time where sports wasn't on in the house and wasn't a very big part of my life. And when I was going to college, and like a lot of kids, had no idea what I wanted to do with myself, my mother was like, "Well, you've always been an athlete and you're a really good English student. Why don't you go and be a sports writer?" So she takes credit for it to this day. Grandpa doesn't take very much credit for it, but he doesn't take a lot of credit for anything, so.
So would you say your grandfather's supportive and thinks you made the right decision in sports?
I would think yes. I don't think anyone has gotten a bigger kick out of my career than my grandfather has. I worked for ESPN for a number of years, and when I was on the road, he would always call me and want to know where I was and who I was talking to and what I was doing and who I was interviewing and what did I see and what was the score and who hit what, and if it was hockey, like did I meet this person that he knew in 1960, and he was always the one that had the most questions for me and was very excited, and my grandparents would both wait for the magazine to come so they could read my stuff. They weren't big internet users, so they didn't really read a lot of stuff online. And now I'm solely doing baseball at MLB.com, and the same kind of thing. When I'm out on the road, he was like, "Oh, who's pitching, and you know, what'd you see, and where'd you sit in the ballpark?" And he just is very involved and wants to know what's up. So he really has been a big part of it. He is very supportive and definitely the most interested of all my family members.
So baseball has been in your family, but what's your personal favorite sport?
Everyone's gonna yell at me, but definitely hockey.
Really? Yeah. And did your grandfather inspire that, or you picked it up on your own?
He actually did. He, right around the same time, my grandfather took me to my first Devils game when his best friend was John McMullen, who brought the Colorado Rockies, who were a hockey team, here to New Jersey, and they became the New Jersey Devils when I was 5. So he brought me to that game at the same time my mother was teaching me to figure skate. And I didn't like people making fun of my figure skates, so I started to play hockey when I was 5. So it was Grandpa really that got me into it. My mother taught me to skate, and I grew up playing hockey and then subsequently covering it. During the 1956 World Series, my grandfather caught the only perfect game in World Series history. The pitcher was Don Larson. This is the jersey that my grandfather wore during that game, which came to us through a very roundabout way. It had been hidden in somebody's house for many, many years. That is the glove he used. It's been bronzed. We also have a ticket stub and one of the plaques that Don gave to the rest of the team to commemorate such a great day.
So I see we have a big family portrait here. Introduce everyone.
Oh God, there's a lot here. So this is my grandmother and my grandfather. This is my dad up here, Larry. He's the oldest son. And then we have Uncle Timmy and Uncle Dale in order. and their wives, and there are 11 grandkids. And we also have one great-grandchild right now, my nephew Jackson, who's not in this picture. But yeah, that's everybody. We're pretty close family, big holidays. Everybody likes each other, gets along, gets together, and eats a lot of food, just like most Italian families around here.
So your grandfather isn't just known for baseball, but he's also known for his yogiisms. Do you have any funny stories to share with us?
It's one funny story after another in our house. They come out of his mouth all the time. It really is just the way he speaks. But for his birthday a few years ago, one of my friends is a columnist for the New York Times, and he called me and he said, I need you to tell me a story about a yogiism that no one's ever heard. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of pressure. Like, he just says them all the time. I don't know. And we just continued to talk, my friend Joe LaPointe and I. And I ended up telling him a story about how I had gone out to do a story for ESPN magazine on a tennis player. And when I came back, my grandfather saw the story in the magazine and he looked at the tennis player and he said, wow, he's really good looking, you should date him. And I said, but Grandpa, he dates a swimsuit model. And he goes, well, you've got swimsuits. And it just really demonstrates just how practical and matter of fact and obvious. He just says whatever it is that's on his mind, and it is true. I do own swimsuits, so he was right.
And he's always been that way, saying whatever on his mind?
Always been that way. Last night we were with him, and we don't allow him to drive anymore for a number of reasons, and he was lamenting the fact that he can no longer drive to the grocery store and get his own bananas, and he said, if you don't have a car, you can't drive. Also true.
Well, Yogi Berra is not just a baseball player, but he's also a realist. So what lessons has your grandfather taught you over the years?
I would say that the number one thing that I've learned from watching him and interacting with him and watching him interact with other people is that at the end of the day, people are people and humility is the most important thing. Obviously at work I deal with a lot of athletes, and as you can imagine there are a lot of very, very large egos in professional sports, but my grandfather, for as famous as he is and as much as he's won, has never had even the slightest bit of ego about him at all. He treats everybody exactly the same way, from the guy who works in the post office to the guy who does his dry cleaning to Reggie Jackson and Derek Jeter and people in my family. And really with him, what you see on television is what we get in real life. He's the same, just genuine, compassionate, humble, really great person all the time. And I think that would be the one thing that I've learned is there's really no reason for anyone to be too big for their britches, because we all wear the same britches.
Is that another yogiism?
No. It's something my grandmother would say.
So do you guys have any special events or exhibits coming up?
We always have a lot of really cool stuff. We have Willie Randolph coming to sign his new book here tomorrow night and do a little Q&A. We had Mookie Wilson come in last week. June 2nd is our annual golf tournament, which is not here but at Montclair Golf Club. And then in mid-June, we're excited, we're going to be putting together an exhibit in conjunction with the ALS Foundation to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Lou Gehrig's Luckiest Man speech. Even though he was dying of ALS, he got up at Yankee Stadium and said, today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Pretty poignant moment in baseball history, and we're going to have a Gehrig exhibit here to help remember that.
Well, that is definitely awesome. So Lindsay Berra, everyone, it was nice meeting another Lindsay, and everyone come check out the museum.
I'm Lindsay Berra. We have lots of social media opportunities here for you at the Yogi Berra Museum. You can come to the museum's website, www.yogiberramuseum.org. You can find the museum on Facebook at Yogi Berra Museum. You can follow the museum on Twitter at Yogi_museum, or you can follow me on Twitter at Lindsay Berra.
This was an amazing opportunity for Double G Sports. We got to head on over to Montclair, New Jersey to Yogi Berra's museum. We got to speak to his first grandchild, Lindsay, and we also got to hear funny stories of Yogi behind the scenes. Don't forget you can check out more Tri-State sports coverage on our website. As always, I'm Lindsay Payne. Time to get me off this mound. Growing up being Yogi Berra's granddaughter is definitely an honor, but what can you... Oh my god, why can't I word this right? Okay. Growing up being Yogi... Okay.
I'm not gonna look at it.
Okay. Growing up being Yogi... Does my hair look like this bad?
No, it looks good.
Okay.
I think this is 70, wait, what's 2014 minus 75? How old are you?
I'm 21.
So you're in that, my mother has this theory that my age, people I'm 36, have AY, and then like the late 20s group is EY, and then the early 20s is AY, and then it went back to EY for like the kids that are teenagers, and now all the new ones are being born AYs.
I'm just gonna start it over. Yeah, everyone my age has EY. I'm like the only AY. And then they tried to pull the LY for.
I'm gonna make you ask it again because I don't know if I'm supposed to be looking at you. The worst one I ever got was LYNZI. I'm like, really?
People need to
Am I a
stop
stripper?
buying that.